We are live. I don't have a top of my head, but that's cool. So
hey, everybody.
So we're here with Daniel from Colorado Public Radio.
Mic check 1 2. Hello. Daniel.
Can you just tell me what you had for breakfast, just so I can get?
I had this cup of coffee for breakfast.
Oh, it's late breakfast.
I actually had a pastrami Reuben for breakfast.
Ooh.
Really?
Yeah. No, I mean, it was the first meal, but it was past noon, so
it's perfect. It was a perfect meal.
Sure.
It was okay.
Yeah, first meal's breakfast.
Yeah.
Makes any meal a showplace.
Yeah.
So, you got your own mic. Oh, so
we're
let's
good.
share this.
All right. So we're all over this.
So I want to start by talking about Dial-A-Song, and so I want to go back to, I think it was 1983 when you first started doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So can you tell me how the concept came about, really? Like, how did that?
How did the concept come about?
Well, like a lot of people who are 23 or 24 years old, we just, sat around having our sort of BS dorm room conversations about things that could be. And then we started doing shows, and things seemed to be working as a band. And then in like 1 week, John fell off his bike and broke his wrist, and I had my apartment robbed, and it suddenly seemed like a good way to keep the momentum for the band going. So we were just, it was kind of a scheme, but basically, for people who don't know what the original Dial-A-Song service was, it was just a phone machine in my kitchen apartment, and it played a song, and we had this big suitcase full of cassettes that had various songs of ours, and we'd swap them in every day, which kind of gave the illusion of it being different every day. But does that sum it up?
That sounds right. I mean, I'm thinking about, like, we were aware of the. I'd never heard Dial-A-Prayer, but it was a concept that existed, and I think there was a thing called Dial-A-Joke briefly in the suburbs of Boston where we grew up. Somebody set up a. I think at the time it was probably difficult to get the equipment to run a phone answering machine, but by the late 70s, there were these cheap commercial machines that you could get. I think in the movie, what was it, in the China Syndrome, Jane Fonda has a phone machine.
Well, also, I mean, like in the Rockford Files, which is in the mid-70s, right?
Yeah, that's
He's
right.
got a phone machine.
Yeah.
But I have to say, like, I had been living in Ohio where no one had a phone machine, and then came to New York where I feel like Eric Drucker had a phone machine.
Right, somebody we knew had
one. An actual real life person. Like they seemed like mythical, fancy things, but then there were these civilian models of it, and it was like it was kind of a craze. Like suddenly everybody had a phone. It's the same way that cell phones or any kind of emerging technology kind of takes over everybody's consciousness. So in a way, kind of taking advantage of it for a creative outlet was good on every level. It was sort of like a new thing, and it was a new thing.
Was it tough to get your music out into the world, and was this sort of a strategy to sidestep any difficulties you were having?
Well, I think part of it was like we were thinking that it was kind of declaring that we were this alternate, and I think I don't know whether we had discussed this precisely, but the idea that we were sort of a personal project that somebody could claim as their own discovery and have a personal relationship to, rather than it being like a thing you'd see on a billboard and then it would be in Tower Records or whatever on the wall, and so I think for a lot of people who originally got into us, that was the appeal, was that we were their personal discovery and wait, can you get a phone call?
I can talk. We can talk and Facebook Live, but I would prefer not to.
Oh, somebody's wondering what we're doing. We're doing a recorded interview for NPR in Denver, Colorado here with Daniel.
It says Daniel's right there.
There's Daniel. And we're in the back of our bus chatting with Daniel.
Yes.
You talked about how fans could have a personal connection to this music. Do you remember some of those early interactions you might have had with people who do that? What did they tell you about that?
Well, one thing is, as the band started playing out more, once we sort of recovered from our setbacks, and Dial-A-Song started establishing itself, I would put up little signs around the East Village, which was a very small community of sort of bohemia in New York at the time, and we would play shows in this East Village scene, and talking to people who thought we were named after the They Might Be Giants was named after the Dial song. You know, just like this, or they had a vague.
That's a weird idea.
They had this vague notion that that it was unrelated, which seemed like a really curious take on it. But that was, I think, the phone project was so oblique that just in what it was for. I mean, a lot of times, it let people could leave messages for when it was in the early days when not that many people called it. It took messages. A lot of times the message was just like, "What was that?" It wasn't like, it didn't really make that much sense. The phone is a terrible way to hear a song. It sounds terrible.
So why bring it back recently? I mean, obviously the landscape has changed quite a bit. People mostly talk through texting and emails.
Well, that's exactly right. And the new version of Dial Song, although it also, there's a phone line, what it really does is it readdresses all the contemporary challenges of being a band in 2018. We actually put out a song every week, which is not the same as just sort of shuffling around songs every day, and that becomes an event, and it creates this year. We're doing it for all of 2018, and it kind of creates this year of hyperactivity around the band that plays right into the way people use social media to discover songs. I mean, most people don't, even though Spotify is very popular and the iTunes, Apple Music is very popular, people don't really use the functions of music discovery on those devices as actively as you'd think. Like, for most people, they hear about bands from their friends, which is just the same way that they always did, probably. But they hear about it through their friends via a Facebook post, or it's like, dig this song, I love this thing. And by having a new song sort of emerge every week, there's just a lot more sharing of our music than there would be otherwise.
Yeah, you mentioned Spotify, things like that, and you guys have always been pretty quick to embrace like the internet and out, like, and things move so fast. Even like 5 years ago, like, it was completely different. How are you guys able to keep up with all that?
I would say that we're not like ahead of the curve with that stuff, but we have been historically open-minded about trying stuff that sounded like a good approach. So we don't always know about stuff in advance of it becoming well known, but we do absolutely embrace. I mean, part of the thing is, and this is true for any musician now, is like it's increasingly harder to make a living as a musician in any of the traditional ways. So there is a really an urgent requirement for you to keep finding new ways to keep your scene going and new avenues for it.
Yeah, I think one of the odd things is that it promotes this idea that we're somehow techies or into stuff like emerging technologies, and I wouldn't say that we're like anti-techie, but I feel like I am not a what do they call those people? First responders? What are the people who get the box, unbox the thing the day it comes out.
Yeah.
Christmas is every day. It's like, right. I've got my new, camera thing. So I feel like I'm always way behind.
Yeah. Well, I think because we're like stingy people, we like buying the second to most recent technology rather than the new thing, just because it's way cheaper.
Well, you guys might not be techies, but I would say some of your fans are, because it's really easy to do research on you guys because there's a wiki page.
Oh yeah,
the wiki page is amazing, and we thank the heavens that it exists, because there's so many things about what we do that are made much easier by the fact that there's a list of every show we've ever played, and we can go back and read the set list for example, for whenever the last time we played in Denver, and try and make a different show based on that. So, I mean, that's just one of its many amazing uses.
But I was thinking we should figure out how we should encourage the wiki people. We have no real official relationship with the wiki. We don't have any control over it. But I have made suggestions over the years, and I've been really happy to see them. Like now, there's a history of They Might Be Giants like calendar, which is nice to see like the different events over the year. But there are no photographs on it. Maybe it's hard to put photographs on a wiki.
I mean, it's good policy. It's like, magazines that insist on being in black and white, even though
I guess so.
Released to do color.
I don't know. I thought it would be good to have some photographic documentation of us getting older and older and older. This was the first show that Flansburgh was in his walker.
Right.
Time lapse.
Yeah.
I just want to switch gears a little bit, talk about your new album, I Like Fun. My understanding is, the last couple albums were sort of compilations of dial-a-song songs, and this one approached a bit more as like a cohesive album. First of all, is that true? And second of all, how did you come to make that switch?
Well, it's sort of true. I mean, we approached... in 2014, we came up with this idea of coming back to dial-a-song, and we realized it was going to take a lot of planning to do it the way we want to do it. I think when you hear the idea explained, one might assume that it's just like demos or these sort of toss-off songs. And but if you really know They Might Be Giants, there's the easy way, and then there's the They Might Be Giants way. And so we really crafted everything to a pretty high standard of production, and we kind of put the dial-a-song first. And then put the albums out afterwards. And so 2015, 2016, we had 3 releases over the course of about 14 months, which is insane. And so now we're doing it again, but we just decided to do it the opposite way. And we really, we wrote and recorded a crazy number of songs.
Yeah,
like 30.
And these songs, unlike the original Dial Song, which really was just demos often recorded on 4-track at home with really simple, and with the thought in mind that these were going to be played over a phone machine, so the fidelity was not really an urgent issue. These were recorded in the way that we record our albums, which is to say we took them into the fancy studio in Manhattan and had our producer, for the most part, I think pretty much everything that's been on Dial Song has gotten that treatment, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions.
But I feel like we should loosen that up. I feel like we should even do like a video. We should just like write some simple songs and do them on video.
Yeah,
it'd be just as interesting.
It really is an act of will for us to do something simple and low tech. I mean, that's like a, that's a choice.
The most spontaneous thing we do is we pretend to be spontaneous people.
The subject matter of this album is maybe a little bit darker than some of the stuff that preceded it most recently. I can name a couple songs like By the Time You Read This and Last Wave, etc. What do you think sparked that on?
Well, this is not the first time we've sort of piled. We write the songs separate. I mean, we write the songs separately. We write the songs. The songs are all sort of evolve in their own ways together.
We never discussed the sort of thematic topics. We tend to just write whatever seems interesting, and I think maybe part of the, if there is like a mission statement, it's like we do not decide what it is we're doing. We want to keep it open-ended and keep open the possibility that something will come. There will be a complete UFO in there somewhere that none of us are. That doesn't fit in with our formula necessarily, because there isn't a formula.
And in general, we also sequence the records for variety's sake. We're trying to include like as much sort of different ideas in one pile of songs as possible. So it's almost the opposite of coming up with something that's thematically cohesive. Like we're actually looking for that rogue track that stands alone, stands apart, and kind of maybe opens up the idea to different possibilities. I feel like this is the second time around for us that we've created an album. We made this album, The Else, sort of at the height of the Bush era, and it was a very, post 9/11, very kind of gloomy period, just sort of existential period in time. And although we weren't really trying, it had this very sort of kind of upbeat, unfun quality to it, and that was exactly kind of the same thing that happened here. It only emerged over time that I don't think we even think about how we live in the moment, like that we're experiencing, and kind of taking in all the events around us.
Yeah, I think when we're writing songs, we want to feel like we're free to write whatever song we want, and it's not just a reflection of whatever depressing thing is happening at that moment. I mean, I think we feel pretty strongly like we don't want to be shackled by that stuff, but inevitably, not just topical things, but personal things happen, and they do affect us. I mean, we don't write autobiographical songs, and we don't write about our personal lives, but we do. I guess we're affected by whatever's happening, and that sometimes seeps up into the songwriting.
And it is like sort of a measure of now. I mean, we're living in a really crazy time, and I think it's sort of people just don't know what's going to happen.
You mentioned, sometimes making these albums you'll have that rogue track or UFO, like you said. Is there a song on this album that you think would you describe?
I think I like Fun.
The actual title track was one of the very last things that came in on the record, and we have this Mellotron, which is a contraption from the 60s. It's the one that we have. It's actually a digital version of it, but it very slavishly reproduces the sound of this instrument that is on Strawberry Fields Forever, and I think yes, Fool on the Hill, and a lot of Beatles songs, but it's also on a lot of sort of prime psychedelic songs. And it's essentially the very first version of a sampler. And as I was going through the sample library of it, I actually discovered there was one thing that was just a vocal that just said J. Bruce, and I realized that they had actually captured Jack Bruce, the bass player of Cream's personal vocal samples, and so he sampled his voice singing over a couple of octaves, and he has
an incredible range.
He's got an incredible range and a beautiful tone in his voice, and so when you play a chord on this keyboard, it basically is a chord of Jack Bruce going like ah, and it was very evocative, and so that was really the jumping off point. I had like this sort of riff and this chord progression I was sort of thinking, because it's like a pulsing, repetitive sample of a vocal sound, it kind of, the only thing I could really think of that was really like Oh Superman by Laurie Anderson. It was like there's the only other, there's not like a million songs that have like voices going like ah, ah, ah in them. It just, because the song is called I Like Fun, but the topic of the song is basically about somebody who's like on prescription drugs and kind of lying to themselves about how much they enjoy their prescription drugs. I feel like, it just had there's something sort of, there's a lot of contrary motion in the song, it's also kind of a pretty song, but it's also about a very dire thing. So I don't know, it just seemed like an interesting track, and we ended up making it the title of the album, which kind of, I feel like it maybe
it's like a curveball.
It's sort of a Trojan horse.
Yeah,
I mean, people, calling it I Like Fun, doing this incredibly gloomy album and calling it I Like Fun just seems like sort of maybe against the rules, but I don't know.
We do like fun, by the way. It should be pointed out.
Yeah.
I just want to sort of go back to the beginning of that stuff you said. You said our music wasn't displayed at Tower Records. We had to do our own thing, and that's one of the reasons you guys are considered pioneers of what's commonly known as like alternative music. And I think by this time, by 2018, that term sort of doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is, did that mean something to you at the time, and if it doesn't mean anything now, what do you think that is?
I think that we partly identified ourselves as being these just out of left field musicians, but I don't know whether that was strictly. I mean, we did get our videos on MTV, and we were displayed at Tower Records, and in many ways, I mean, I think, without having a number one hit in the United States, which we have not done. Not yet. But in many other ways, I think we're now kind of about as establishment as you can be. We've done TV themes, and we've done kids records, and we've sold we've won Grammys and we've sold gazillions of records. So it's
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We're coming knocking. It's about time if you can put in Journey for damn sake.
Yeah,
put in
exactly.
that chart.
But
am I wrong, people?
But I think the thing is, it's kind of a state of mind. How alternative you are. It's just.
Well, I mean, what's odd? I mean, we came up. In some ways, I personally feel like we're like the last new wave band. Like, it took us so long to get out of the local New York scene. We started in 82, 83, and at that moment, new wave was like what was happening. It was the actual happening thing. There was no college rock. There was no alternative rock, our success was so slow in coming. We ended up landing in this college rock, college music circuit in the late 80s, which really was a thing, and it was a very DIY scene. It was just a lot of bands like bands that people know, like Husker Du and 10,000 Maniacs and The Replacements and us, and the Pixies, then a little bit later on the Pixies, and it was a time that was before the grunge thing kind of codified the idea of like what indie rock meant or what alternative rock meant. There was this kind of wide open. It was more defined by the places you played than the style of music you played.
Right. Yeah. There was a very broad definition. And again, it is completely a perceptual thing. It's not. It's like defining what a planet is or something. I think it's
right. Or trying to sum up.
There's no science behind it.
So, this is a hard question to answer, but in 2018, where do you see you guys fitting in there now? Like, is there,
I think we're lucky in a way that we don't need to fit in particularly. We can just continue to do our, do this. I think we could just as well be like selling fast food. Like, we're just doing a thing and touring around and we're successful at this level. We're doing fine. So it doesn't really matter who we are perceived to be, I think, at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like it's community in music is such a strange thing, because a lot of times people want to sort of lash you together with your with like immediate contemporaries. Like, I feel like there's a whole set of bands that are dealing with humor and trying to also be like a compelling rock band. And I mean, I'll say, like, the Bare Naked Ladies, or like Ben Folds, or like there's all these people. Like, when you go on any kind of music site, it'll be like, if you like this, you'll also like this. And what's interesting to me, just dealing with those like, obviously there's something like-minded about these bands on some level, but the thing is, the actual very specific choices you need to make to be a band that has humor in your music are so personal that I think we really recoil from. I don't know if like Poison recoils from being compared to Motley Crue when like they're in the hair band section of iTunes. Maybe they're like, those guys are nothing like us. It's nobody wants to be pigeonholed, but I think like what's unusual about what the sort of the genre of music that we're in is that it's like there isn't a community there. I mean, I think everybody's sort of struggled with how to do something that is worth listening to again and again, and holds up to time and are quality songs, but also has this like personal sensibility of humor in it. And it's an odd question, but it is. I don't think there's an easy answer. I just don't want to be compared to Poison anymore.
That's all I got, guys. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you.
Nice talking to you.
All right.
Say.
It's on the thing. It's tagged.
I know. I just want
let's
people to see
There's Daniel. Yes.
There's Daniel. He's the guy we're talking
everybody.
to. Sorry, this thing will not stay still.
I know. I should have taken Scott up on his thing.
There's Daniel, NPR. Hello.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for talking.
Thank you.
Wanna
Beautiful. Yeah. Like finish. Ding a thing.